Alright, this is the next video about redoing the bathroom, and this is about building a light fixture for over the Vanity and working on the doors. Now, I ordered some parts off of Amazon to build my fixture with, and this is just a transformer that steps down from my 120 volts down to 12 volts, and that's a 5 amp one. I ordered some LED strip lights, and these actually are a super bright LED, and they're a double density LED. So these strips in about a 15-foot strip have twice the number of LEDs in the strip as a standard one. And you can see they do come with a plug on the end of one side of them, so you could plug it in and use it, but I'm cutting them up into pieces to patch together my light. And then I had some leftover parts from when I did the kitchen light to use too. So there you can see how it kind of goes together. The LED strip sticks in the aluminum extrusion that acts as a heat sink, and then you put a cover over it. And they're pretty easy to connect. I used all these little slip-on connectors in my kitchen lighting. But here you can see the strips I ordered there on the bottom there on the left side have twice the number of LEDs of the strips that I used on my kitchen there. So this is going to be I'm trying to get a much brighter fixture, and I'm going to have looks like about 55 watts of LED power in this fixture. And they all come with a good 3M double-sided adhesive tape on the back there to mount them. And these strips are really cool because you can just cut them about every inch. There's a mark there where you can cut them and wind up with a set of contacts to slip on one of those connectors to power it up. So you don't really have to worry about length too much. And these are the connectors that I did use on my when I did the kitchen lights. And all they do is you just when you cut it, you can see those little copper tabs that are there, and you just slide it on. And they've been working out there in my kitchen for a couple of years now with no problem. So that's one way to do it. On this light fixture, I wound up having to solder them though because of space. So that's, these are what I'm starting with, and you can see I've cut the 15-foot strip down into 6 sections now to get going. And then the same day I had contacted Inker because I had problems with that one board warping up, this one here, the center one, and they actually sent me out apparently they come in a set, and they sent me out a set of them to replace that. So I really have to thank them for doing that. And you can see this is the board that I had that had warped up between the screws that I'm just gonna replace now. Take a couple minutes and get that all straightened up because I do have some critical cuts to make. So that's a real easy 15-minute swap out by the time I got done, and just some flathead screws. And when it was all done, everything, no more lumps or anything, everything's perfectly flat again, so we're all set to go. Then I've got some couple things going on here. I'm working on the doors here. I'm just starting to cut some strips up. I've already planed and jointed the lumber. And here you can see why I like that Craig stop better than the Incra stop, and I've replaced the fence because it just takes one hand to set up the stop and just slip it into place. And so this is what works best for me. But the the fixture itself really is nice, having it all back to nice and flat and accurate again. So I'm just cutting up some of these strips to make the 2 door frames. I figured I was just trying to keep them all square edge and everything, so I could just do it all on the table saw with a dado head and stuff. So first I cut the vertical stiles, I guess they call them, or they're the rails, and then these are the cross stiles. So these are a little bit shorter, and I had to make sure I added enough for the mortise and tenon I was going to be adding on later too, which I'll show in a second. So there's the the basic parts for the door cut, ready to go, all matched together. In the meantime, I ordered a double wide extrusion for these that finally showed up, and you can see this one's the original one on the left there is half as wide. And this one actually is wide enough to hold 2 strips in it, because I have to get 6 strips total in this area. So it's over to the evolution saw, and it makes it real easy to cut these. I just put a block of wood in them to keep anything from deforming, and you can see that gives a really nice cut. So you know, it's an easy thing to do. And one thing that I did notice, though, I really like that single wide strip that I used, because it had little places extruded into it for the outer cover, that plastic opaque cover to clip in. And these channels actually are missing that feature. It looks like they forgot to do them when they extruded it, so the covers just kind of are friction fit in these. So I'm not really happy at all with these channels, but you know, I had to use them, and I did wind up putting a couple drops of super glue in to hold make sure the thing wouldn't fall out later. But you can see whenever you cut these little thin aluminum pieces, you really want to have it clamped good in the saw, because if anything should shift and it grabs, you'll really wind up with a big mess, and you could actually get hurt. So I try to clamp everything down good and tight, and it's really easy to cut them all the same then. So I got all the extrusions all cut, and time to do the final trimming on the light strips. And you can see there's that line right between the contacts there, and I'm just gonna cut them all the same length right on that line. And I did have a little bit of waste, because like I said, I started out by trimming them into 6 pieces. And for these, I can't fit the connectors in these double wide tracks, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solder wires on. And I hate soldering. I'm not that good at it, but you got to do it every once in a while. I wish I had a little bit smaller tip for my soldering iron for this, but first thing you have to do is you have to heat the wire up and melt the solder into it so you can tin the wire good. And then you also have to heat up this little contact here and just apply a coat of solder on that, so that's completely coated. You have to make sure you have enough heat to actually transfer the solder to it. And like I said, the tip I have is a little big for these, but it's all I had for now to use. So you get them both tinned up, and then it's just a matter of going back, and I'm not that steady here. I'm a little bit shaky. It's kind of little tiny stuff, but you just have to just hold the soldering tip on them, hold them together for about a second, and you'll see the solder immediately just flow around everything and form a really good bond. So this is another way to connect these to a power supply, and when you don't have room for the actual connectors themselves, this is really the best way to go. And make sure I didn't have enough solder on that little tab to begin with. So there's one of them put together, and you can see I've got 2 strips sitting side by side in that channel there. Just kind of clipped them in place to hold it while I'm soldering, because it makes it a little bit easier if things don't move around. Now you can just see how a little bit shaky for doing this, but that's what happens when you get old, I guess. So got them all soldered up, and I'm just going to put a piece of tape around there just in case any solder ran around the backside. Want to make sure there's no way that it could ever short out to the aluminum extrusion. And then these extrusions come with little end caps that you just tap in. And you see they have a hole for wires, and I actually put another little piece of tape in there just to be sure the end of the strip where it was cut could never touch either. So just a little extra precaution, is probably not required. But then you just have to peel the backing back, and there's a really strong 3M adhesive double-sided tape on these things, and you want to make sure you do it a little bit at a time and just work all the lumps and bumps out of the light while you're going. You want this to be pressed tight against the extrusion, because that actually acts as a heat sink to help make these little lights last longer. So take your time and you go along and just press a little bit at a time, and press on each LED just to make sure you really got it all flattened out. And because they do come with some lumps in the tape when you buy them. And there you can see I've got two of those extra LED strips side by side. And I got the wires coming out the other side. I'm just going to tap in the other end there. And, basically there's the first one done. Now these covers that come with it, you have to cut them down too once you cut the strip. I mean, they're made to fit the full strip. And there you can see how they go in, how this one had nothing to really catch on. It's just kind of a friction fit in there. And if you look at this other one, they actually did the extrusion right, and there's little grooves extruded in there that the cover locks in nice and tight, which they're a much better extrusion, even though they're from the same company. So I just used one of those little razor blade knives that I've got to cut it. It's fairly soft and easy to cut. So you can use a knife, or I guess you could use a saw, but you really don't need one. And then that just kind of pushes in with friction, like I said. And I did each one. I just had to test it before I went any further to make sure that, I did have them all working. And there's the 3 of them all ready to go into the fixture. So that's one job done. Now it's time to start actually building the main board for the fixture. So this was, I didn't show all the joining and planing and everything, but it went through that process. It started out with a piece of rough cherry. And this is the same wild cherry from my backyard that I'm using in everything here. And then I just had to set up the dado on the table saw here and run some grooves to put those little aluminum extrusions in. I wanted them to be completely recessed in this board here, just so that you wouldn't really see anything other than the little white covers on them. So I did everything off center here and just kind of flipped it and ran it again just to make sure everything was going to be centered when I was done. And there's the channel for the first one. You can see how that just fit right in there perfect. And then it was time to go back and add the 2 side channels. And I did just use an undersized dado set here, and I just moved the fence once to get everything to come in right. So there it is, they're all cut and everything's ready to go. And over to the router table, and kind of just I wanted to throw some radiuses on it to match the vanity corner, and just makes it a real easy job that goes nice and smoothly. Really nice having a decent router table to keep everything properly held down and supported, and square and stuff like that. Make it easy to set the depths and stuff. So I got that done, and then I had to go up and patch the holes where the old anchors for the old light fixture were, and actually put a coat of paint on that area to cover that up. So this was all part of getting this ready to go. And then I went back and started doing a little bit of work on the doors again, while I did sand and put 3 coats of polyurethane on that actual board for the lights. So while that's drying and waiting for the next coats, I'm just gonna keep them busy by putting some grooves around the inside of all the door parts here. And the same thing, I did these doors just with the table saw. And then I just have to cut the tenons on the end of the stiles. And I decided I'm going to mortise them into the door just about an inch, just to give it a little bit of extra strength. So I'm just cutting them right on this Inkgrass sled here, and it's real nice. I'm getting real nice flat cuts again and stuff like that, so it's working out good. And there you can see one side's done, and I put a stop block on there to start the cut. And then I just have to step it a couple times because the blade I put on is not wide enough. So there's one of them all, pretty much all cut out. And here we'll do another one here. You can see how I wound up stepping it. I just started at the stop block and stepped it back and then flipped it and did the other side. And this is why I put the anchor jig on the left hand side of the saw, so I don't have to worry about the dado blade hitting the jig or anything, because you're always referenced against the arbor there, so it does not mess up your zero clearance. And then back to take the bottom out there to give it a little bit of relief for everything to go together. And actually that's the top that has to fill the groove that's cut in the vertical part of the door. So they're all cut, ready to go, and time to go back and put the light fixture together here. Start putting it together. And I just put some double-sided tape behind each of those extrusions there and put them up with that. And I'm just going to go through and test it again before I get the wires buried in there. And in the meantime, I actually made a trip down to Walmart to pick some things up, and they had these sawhorses, plastic sawhorses, marked down half price. A really nice set of them, 2 packs, supposed to hold 1,200 pounds. I got for $14.99 there. They're regular like $30, and really are some nice sawhorses for plastic. I don't know how they'll stand up, but I thought it was a good bargain. And then time to start cutting the end pieces for the light fixture. And I actually used double-sided tape, as I've shown you before, just to put the 2 blocks together because they have to be identical. And I'm just kind of hacking away at them on the bandsaw. It's a 5/8 wide blade, so I can't really turn a tight radius or anything. So I'm just, staying back from the line a little bit so I can go back on this belt sander and clean them up and bring everything right down to the lines. I have to tell you that this is one of the favorite tools in my shop now. It just makes everything so easy to clean up and sand, especially when you're dealing with radiuses and stuff like that and trying to blend things together. It's really nice, and even with the flat panels, it's good because you've got like a 30-inch surface there to deal with. So there's my blocks, and time to set up the mortising attachment on the drill press. Now, I didn't use the fence and the hold downs that come with it. I just used that top section for holding the chisel there. And I took a piece of angle iron I've got and just used a little piece of wood clamped on the top to keep it from, raising when I pull it out. So I'm just using a little 1/4-inch bit here to just clear out for the ends of the lights that I have actually extending past the end of the fixture there to hide all the those little plastic caps and stuff. And then on the other one, I actually have a spot here that I'm mortising in to hide those 3 wires that come out of the light fixture, each of the individual LED strips, and bring them into a spot there so I can just kind of solder them all together and they'll be hidden. And there you can see there's a pocket to hide the wires in right above the one for the light strips. And then back to the router table. I got to put some radiuses on here to match everything else, and I find those little sponge rubber pusher blocks really work good for these tiny things. They grab them good, and they allow you to keep your hands back away from the bit a little bit. So I find I've been using them a lot for when I do tight, small things on the router table. And you can see I got a little burning. I've got it running a little bit fast for cherry, but it's the only way to get a clean cut. And then here I had that mortise attachment on the drill press, and I just figured I'd go back and cut the door mortises here. So that's what I'm doing here. Same thing, I didn't use a top clamp. I just clamped a couple pieces of wood on there to keep everything from moving. and just took my time, and this time I'm going down in almost an inch, so it does take a while when you're dealing with this little 1/4 inch bit. Try to feed it too fast and you actually will snap the bit, I found. So just take your time, and you know, it's really easy to put mortises like this in. I just, you know, do a 1/4 inch and step it, and then do another one. And when you're done, you've got your pocket, and just have to take a chisel in there and clean out all the dust, and everything fits together nice. And you know, there's the 2 doors basically assembled, ready for the center panels to be cut. So now it's time to, I've got these ends all finished and everything. You can see they slide on over there and they hide everything, and they help hold the reflector in place. And I just glued them on, and that's all pretty much all ready to go. And when I put the light in place, I found out that with these LEDs and a fixture like this, you only get down light. You get absolutely no light from the back side of it like you do from a big glass globe. So I decided to incorporate another series of LEDs up in the top of it also. So now I'm kind of making that top channel, and this actually here, I'm using 2 of those chrome brackets from those wall hangers, the hooks that I used for the actual door handles on the Vanity. Well, these are the backing plates for there that I'm using to hang this light fixture, because I wanted to get that little bit of chrome up there too. So I did a little drilling on them, and I got this top bar made up to hide all the wires. Are all under it now, and the top LED is going to go in it. So I just had to mount it and put a couple of screws in there on an angle so they wouldn't hit the wires down below. It's funny, the only screws I had available that were the right length were some old brass wood screws, and I guess I just haven't used a flathead screwdriver on a wood screw in just many years. That seemed kind of strange. So there it is, you know, basic lights put together, and everything's working on it now. Everything's illuminated. You see the wires come out the center there. Everything's hidden in it. And the only thing I have to do now is just put that top wire in. And I built the cover out of cardboard for it, just to get it right before I made it out of wood, because it actually has to hold that transformer up there, and that's a pretty good sized transformer. And then for this, I did order some of the regular strip lights that, you know, don't have the high density LEDs in them, and I'm going to use the rest of them for behind my TV. So I ordered a kit that came with a power supply and a dimmer also. So I just cut off the amount I needed to fill this strip up, and this is one of those aluminum extrusions that I used in my kitchen, the narrow ones. And I'll put some Amazon links to all these different parts now. You know, this is just what I use, but there's just such a selection of different color LEDs to choose from, and you know, all kinds of different brightnesses, and all kinds of different controllers and stuff like that. So, you know, you might want to do some research if you decide to start a project like this to get the exact look that you want. So same thing, I didn't have much room up there, so I just decided to tin these wires and solder them to the strip itself. So you can see they just kind of are all buried down underneath in that channel there. Having big fingers makes it tough. Sometimes you wish you had fingers half the size. But you take your time, and you know, eventually you'll get it. And you just don't want to get much heat on the by the LED itself. So that's all ready to try, and there you can see the light light work nice. And they do put out a lot less illumination than the bottom ones. And actually, in the end, it turned out to be really a perfect combination for the room. And to hold that top strip in place, I'm just going to put four little dabs of silicone in there, so I could always pop it out later if I have to take this apart for some reason to get it to wiring or something like that. I had to just kind of shove the wires back down in because I need a little bit out to have room to solder them. And that's buried in there, so you don't even know that this light strip is in there when you look at the light from the bottom. But it really does make a difference in how it illuminates the room. Just gives it such a nice soft light on the top, and it spreads throughout the whole white ceiling. So there it is. Now, these are some boards that I had prepared for the door panels, and I'm just cutting them down to get the waste off of them to use to build that little cardboard cover that you saw a couple seconds ago. So this is just cutting some, cutting them down a little bit. And then just kind of slicing them down to size, and really makes things like this easy when you start out with a couple pieces of cardboard and work out exactly what you want before you start turning it into wood. And then you can see I was able to turn that miter sled at the angle I needed, and that little clamp that comes with it there, that one really makes a big difference when you're working on an angle like that. It does keep things from sliding, especially when you're working tight places like this. And there I just even flipped it up on the end and using that to do the final trimming. And then I had a thinner piece, and you could hear the little piece that I cut off of it going back, hitting the router table when you came off the saw. That usually happens when you're cutting with a blade on an angle like that, so you want to be careful. So now I'm just gonna glue the pieces of this little box together here. Again, that little glue bot that they call it, at least the glue bottle, really does help spread the glue and stuff like that. And I've just got some piece clamped on there to hold everything flush when I put it together, so I can get the main clamps on it. So once everything's pretty much aligned there, I can just clamp it together. And as I've said 1,000 times before, you can never have enough clamps. They always do help you out in situations like this. And when you're dealing with angles and stuff like that, it really helps to, clamp on an extra board to keep things aligned while you're trying to, get everything to the final position. So there's a cover all glued up. Just needs a little bit of sanding and trimming, and there you can see it. Basically, it looks identical to the cardboard one I started out with, and fits over the back of the light just like that. Drops on, locks in place, and the transformer goes in there. But I actually wanted to add a heat sink for the transformer, because they do get a little bit warm over time. I didn't want it right up against the wood, so I just had a little piece of U-channel aluminum that the transformer fit perfectly in, and I cut that, and I put a screw in there and some silicone to hold it in place, and there you can see the transformer is actually pressed up against it with a piece of foam, and it does a really good job of transferring the heat and keeping that cool. Plus you can see the opening in the back of that box that allows the heat to escape. So all the wires and everything are buried in there now, and you won't see them. Time to go up and start installing it. Now I forgot to pick up a cover for that outlet. I'm gonna have to throw one on there later, but I just had some two screws I had put in there originally when I did the testing to come up with the size of the cover. So I'm just trying to locate them again because they're exactly centered over the mirror. So I've got, in the end, I've actually got 4 screws going through those chrome brackets to hold everything in place here, and they did work out really nice. They're perfectly, nice, stable and strong, and give it a little bit of chrome up there to match everything else. So this is the fun part, when you're doing the final install on stuff like this. And in that box, I've got the power supply in there, and that just plugs into the light and then plugs into the wall and locks down over the chrome brackets there. And you really don't see that box at all when you're looking at it from the bottom. It kind of looks like it's suspended just above the light. And it actually turned out that it's just the perfect distance from the mirror, so that you don't get glare in the mirror, and you don't actually get any glare on your face or anything like that. It's really turned out to be a really nice light for the mirror. I'm real happy that I went this way and didn't just go with an off-the-shelf fixture like we had before. And I figure with the wattage in these LEDs is actually equivalent to the wattage of the 360 watt bulbs we had before. So there it is. Everything's put together now, all done, ready to go. And you can see the light on top there. Just throws out a nice glow that really does do a good job of illuminating the rest of the room. Here we are at night. You can see it really does shine out there. And the night lights work good too. Those are those ones I did the video on a while ago. But so basically I just thought I'd do an update at this point because I didn't want to continue doing the doors. Otherwise it just would have been too long. And I figured I'd stop here. And I've had people ask me about using these LEDs and stuff. So I thought this would be a good way to give you a little bit of an introduction to them. And they're really a lot of fun to play with, and they don't cost a lot. And I'd say if you're thinking about doing a project like this, just buy a couple strips and figure out exactly what you want to do and how much light you need. And the next video will be my seeds of 2020. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.